Why was she standing alone, while 48 others held formation? The Georgia air clung heavy and wet, pressing down on the training field before dawn. Boots were planted, backs straight, breath controlled. Everyone looked identical except her. She stood a step apart, right arm cradled tight against her chest, shoulders drawn inward like she was trying to disappear. A voice cracked through the dark, sharp, final. "Mitchell, back in formation, now." She didn't move. That's when the laughter started. It always does when someone looks weak. Emma Mitchell didn't look like a soldier. She was small, quiet. Her hair pulled into a regulation bun that barely held. Her arm trembled when she shifted her weight, the shake visible even from a distance. The drill sergeant saw only what he expected to see. A liability, another recruit who wouldn't last. "Medical excuse," someone muttered. "Fake," another said. Phones came out, smirks followed. Emma said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence could be armor. The sergeant counted down. 10 seconds. 9. 8. Each number sharpened the humiliation. Every second stretched, heavy with judgment. Her sleeve slipped for just a moment, just enough for dark ink to appear against pale skin. Someone laughed louder. "What is that, a prison tattoo?" She pulled the sleeve back down. Too late. The sergeant stepped closer, spittle, coffee breath, rage. "You don't get special treatment here," he said. "You're either strong or you're gone." Emma's jaw tightened. She stayed still. And that was the moment everything began to unravel, slowly, deliberately, like a trap being sprung, one quiet second at a time. Why would someone who looked broken choose to endure public humiliation instead of defending herself? When hands reached for her shoulder, she stepped back, not fast, not aggressive, just enough. The movement was smooth, controlled, almost practiced. A veteran nearby noticed. So did she. But still, Emma said nothing. They ordered her to the ground, push-ups, modified, one arm, a spectacle for everyone to enjoy. A boot pressed down on her back. Laughter echoed, phones recorded. Her arm shook violently, but her body moved with mechanical precision. Each rep clean, measured, efficient. Pain flickered across her face, but not panic. That's what gave her away. Pain she knew, panic she didn't allow. As her sleeve rode higher, the ink became clearer. Curved lines, coils, a shape that didn't belong to bravado or rebellion. It belonged to something older, something deliberate. A snake. The obstacle course was meant to finish her. She cleared it instead. Crawling low beneath wire like she'd done it 100 times before. Scaling a wall with explosive efficiency. Moving not like a recruit, but like someone who understood terrain, leverage, momentum. The rope climb silenced the crowd. She wrapped her legs in a pattern no one taught in basic training. She climbed using her body, not brute strength. Ascended with one arm compromised and still nearly beat the base record. When she reached the top, she didn't raise her arms. She simply touched the beam and came back down. "Done," she said quietly. That single word landed heavier than any shout. The captain watched her now, not with irritation but with doubt. And doubt is dangerous when it meets truth. What kind of recruit assembles a weapon wrong on purpose? The rifles lay disassembled on metal tables, timers ticking, cameras rolling. This time Emma failed. Pieces slipped, parts clattered. Her trembling hand betrayed her. The mocking returned, louder, relieved. But one man noticed the order of her mistakes. She wasn't fumbling. She was demonstrating. Backward sequences, advanced patterns, knowledge no beginner should possess. She was hiding in plain sight, letting incompetence become camouflage. Then the tablet arrived. Background checks don't come back perfect. Perfect means scrubbed. The captain's face went pale as he read names that weren't supposed to exist, units that lived in rumor, operations buried so deep even metals couldn't surface. A snake, 7 coils, a skull. When someone grabbed her injured arm, instinct took over. 3 seconds. That's all it took. The man hit the floor hard. Breath gone, joint locked, control absolute, then release. Silence fell like a weapon. Her sleeve had been torn back. The tattoo stared at them. Not decoration, not bravado. A signature. "I'm sorry," Emma said softly, reflex. The captain whispered what no one else could say out loud. "You're real." She met his eyes for the first time without hiding. "I need to speak to the colonel," she said. "And we don't have much time." Why would a decorated operative willingly let herself be treated like nothing? The truth spilled quietly. Her unit had been betrayed, ambushed, 4 dead, 1 survivor, nerve damage from torture, tremors that never stopped, a leak traced back not overseas but home. She didn't come to train. She came to hunt. If she arrived strong, the traitor would vanish. If she arrived broken, they'd watch, mock, relax, and reveal themselves. That morning had been theater, every insult useful, every shove a test. Someone had been watching. When vehicles moved where they shouldn't, Emma noticed first. Patterns never lie. The chase was fast, dirty, real. No speeches, no heroics. Just instinct and necessity. A shot she couldn't make because of her tremor was made by someone who'd once mocked her instead. Lives balanced on timing. Evidence gathered, a network exposed. Justice, not revenge, delivered. When it was over, Emma stood apart again. Not broken. Just tired. What happens after the truth comes out? Apologies came. She accepted none of them personally. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about the next person you decide doesn't belong." She left the way she arrived. Quietly. No ceremony, no credit, no trace. But the base changed. Instructors hesitated before mocking. Recruits looked twice before judging. Silence stopped being mistaken for weakness. Years passed. Operations succeeded that shouldn't have. Ambushes never happened. Somewhere in the shadows, a woman with a trembling hand kept working, adapting, teaching ghosts how to survive with scars instead of despite them. Her hand shook. Her aim didn't. Why do some people never need recognition to matter? Emma Mitchell became a story told carefully, not as legend, but as warning. That strength doesn't always announce itself. That dignity doesn't shout. Sometimes it stands quietly while the world laughs and waits. Because real power doesn't need to prove itself. It simply acts. And sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone chose to ignore. Why did she keep her eyes forward when every instinct screamed to fight back? The laughter didn't stop when she dropped to the ground. If anything, it grew teeth. Boots shifted in the wet grass as people leaned in, hungry for a spectacle. Phones rose higher. Someone whistled. Someone else muttered that she wouldn't last 5 seconds. Emma Mitchell placed her left palm flat against the earth, fingers splayed, testing the ground like she was listening to it. Her right arm stayed tight against her ribs, trembling now in a way that looked almost theatrical. Almost. The drill sergeant loomed above her, shadow swallowing what little light the morning had offered. "Push-up position," he snapped. "Since you want to make excuses, you can make it up to us." Emma lowered herself carefully, protecting her right side. The first push-up was slow, controlled, technically perfect. The second came easier, the third steadier. Her breathing settled into a rhythm that didn't belong to panic. In through the nose, out through the mouth. 4 seconds, hold, release. Someone laughed again. Look at her shaking. They didn't hear the quiet click in her head, the one that locked pain away behind muscle memory. A boot pressed down between her shoulder blades, not enough to break her, enough to humiliate. Her body dipped an inch, corrected itself, and rose again. The tremor worsened, rippling through her forearm like static on a broken screen. This was the moment she could have ended it. She could have twisted, dropped him, put the entire field on the ground in under 10 seconds, every angle, every weakness. She'd already mapped them unconsciously. The man behind her, the one to her left, the uneven spacing between the third and fourth ranks, the way fear would travel once the first body hit the grass. She didn't, because strength, she had learned, was only useful if deployed at the right time. She counted instead. 5, 6, 7. Her sleeve rode up another fraction. Dark ink, curved, intentional. A whisper moved through the formation. Is that a snake? Emma's jaw tightened, not from fear but from memory. The boot pressed harder. Her core engaged automatically, spine aligned, breath controlled. She rose again. 8, 9. A foot clipped her injured arm, not hard, careless, but it sent a spike of white-hot pain up her shoulder and straight into her neck. Her body faltered. For a fraction of a second, the world tilted. She caught herself. No cry, no curse. Just a sharp inhale she swallowed before it could become anything else. The silence that followed wasn't respect. It was confusion. Why did her failure look so deliberate? They hauled her to her feet like dead weight, hands rough, words sharper. The sergeant's voice cut through the haze, declaring her unfit, unfinished, done. Someone said something about discharge paperwork. Someone else joked about wasted rations. Emma barely heard them. Her focus narrowed inward, where pain met discipline and discipline held the line. As they marched her away, she scanned without appearing to scan. Reflections in windows, the spacing between guards, the way one man walked half a step ahead instead of beside her, the rhythm of boots on gravel. She adjusted her gait subtly, limp exaggerated, balance redistributed. She needed them to believe the story they'd already written. The obstacle course waited like a verdict. Barbed wire, walls, ropes, designed to expose weakness, to humiliate it publicly. Emma stopped at the first station. Not because she was afraid. Because she was calculating. Move it, the sergeant barked. She dropped low and crawled. Her movements were clean, efficient. She used her legs more than her arms, sliding through the mud like water finding its own path. She exited the wire faster than most recruits did on their best days. Someone muttered, "Lucky." Luck had nothing to do with it. The wall came next. 8 feet of vertical wood, minimal grips, designed to force commitment. Emma stepped back. 2 paces. Then she ran. Not fast, explosive. She hit the wall left side first, momentum carrying her upward. Her hand caught the edge. Her body followed. She swung, rolled, and dropped down the other side in a single motion that stole the sound from the air. 4 seconds. The laughter died awkwardly, like a joke told too late. The rope stood tallest. 30 feet, no knots, no mercy. She stared up at it, longer than necessary. Let them think she was afraid. Then she wrapped her legs. The pattern was wrong for basic training, too efficient, too economical. Anyone who knew would know. She climbed. Not fast. Perfect. Each movement deliberate, each grip measured. Her right arm assisted only when absolutely necessary, stabilizing rather than pulling. She reached the top with her breathing steady, heart rate controlled, and descended with the same discipline. When her boots touched the ground, the field was quiet. "Done," she said. Not proud. Just factual. Why did the captain start asking questions no one wanted answered? They took her to weapons assembly next, the test everyone feared, timers, eyes, judgment. This time, Emma let herself fail. She picked up the wrong part first, dropped it, reached again, let her trembling hand betray her. Each mistake landed like proof for those who needed it. See, someone laughed, knew it. But the veteran, watching her, noticed the order. Backward. Precise. Advanced. She wasn't fumbling. She was teaching silently how deep the knowledge went. When the captain returned, his face had changed. Pale wasn't the right word. Hollow was closer. He cleared the room. Phones were lowered reluctantly, doors shut, the air thickened. "Your file is perfect," he said, "too perfect." Emma said nothing. He talked about units that didn't exist, operations no one admitted to, a survivor with nerve damage, a tattoo with 7 coils. "Show me your arm," he ordered. She didn't. Not yet. When someone grabbed her, instinct won. 3 seconds. Grip turn, drop, lock. The room froze. She released him immediately, like she'd touched fire and pulled back. "I'm sorry," she said, reflex. Her sleeve was gone. The snake stared at them all. 7 coils. A skull. Numbers etched like a gravestone. "I need to see the colonel," Emma said quietly. "And you need to understand something." They leaned in without realizing it. "I didn't come here to prove I'm strong." Her eyes lifted for the first time, meeting theirs without apology. "I came here because someone betrayed my unit, and they're still watching." The room didn't breathe. And for the first time that morning, the people who had mocked her understood the truth that landed heavier than any command. She had never been weak. She had been waiting. Why did the room feel smaller the moment her secret came out? No one moved. Not the captain, not the drill sergeant, not the recruits frozen near the door with guilt still fresh on their faces. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, suddenly too loud, like they were afraid of the silence. Emma Mitchell stood in the center of it all, her sleeve torn back, the black snake exposed without ceremony. 7 coils, a skull clenched in its jaws, ink so dark it looked burned into her skin rather than placed there. She didn't try to cover it. She had done that long enough. "I need to speak with Colonel Matthews," she said again, her voice calm, controlled, steady in a way that made people uncomfortable. "Immediately." The captain swallowed hard. "That's the base commander." "I know." Something in her tone told him this wasn't a request. It wasn't arrogance either. It was certainty, the kind that comes from standing in places where rank stops mattering and survival becomes the only currency. Someone laughed nervously near the door, a weak sound, defensive. "This is ridiculous," a voice said. "Anyone can get a tattoo." Emma didn't look at them. She was listening instead. Listening for the shift. It came quietly. A scrape of boots outside, radios chirping, a door opening down the hall that shouldn't have opened yet. Subtle things. The kind only someone who had lived inside ambushes learned to hear. "They know," she said suddenly. The captain blinked. "Who knows?" "The person I'm here for." The room tightened. Why would someone infiltrate their own base as the weakest recruit on purpose? Colonel Matthews arrived like weather, sudden, unavoidable, heavy with authority. Conversations died as he stepped inside. He took one look at Emma's arm and did something that stunned everyone present. He removed his cover and saluted. The gesture landed like a shockwave. "Operative Mitchell," he said evenly. "I was told Unit 731 was KIA." Emma returned the salute without hesitation. Perfect form, no tremor. "Ghosts are hard to kill, sir." The drill sergeant's face drained of color. Words tried to form but fell apart halfway out of his mouth. The colonel turned slowly, his gaze cutting through the room. Clear it now. People didn't argue. They didn't question. They left with the quiet urgency reserved for moments when careers and lives hang in the balance. When the door shut, the colonel spoke again, Tell me why you're here." Emma exhaled. Not relief. Preparation. "My unit was burned 3 years ago," she said. "Not by bad intel, not by chance, by someone who knew our insertion time, route, and fallback points." She stepped to the map on the wall, fingers hovering just above it, not touching. "We lost 4 operators in the first 12 minutes. The 5th, that was me, held position for 72 hours so a Marine unit could extract." The veteran near the wall stiffened. "You were Tower 4, he said quietly. Emma looked at him then, really looked, her eyes sharpened, recognition clicking into place. "You had a St. Christopher medal wrapped around your rifle." His throat worked. "You saved 13 of us." She nodded once. No pride, no softness, just acknowledgement. "But here's the part no one wanted to hear," she continued. "That ambush couldn't have happened without inside help. I tracked the leak across financial records, dead drops, comm patterns. Every trail ended here." Silence stretched. The colonel folded his arms. "So you came in undercover." "As someone no one would fear," Emma said. "A weak recruit, someone to mock, someone to ignore." Her eyes flicked toward the door they just closed. "And it worked." Why did her calm feel more dangerous than anger? An alarm began to wail outside, not the loud kind, the controlled kind, lockdown. Emma moved to the window before anyone else reacted. Her posture shifted, subtle, predatory. The tremor faded into background noise as focus took over. "2 vehicles," she said. "Black sedan, silver pickup. They weren't here during PT." The colonel grabbed his radio. "Security." "Too late," Emma cut in. "He's already moving." "Hey." "The traitor." The room exploded into motion. Radios crackled. Orders overlapped. But Emma was already pulling data from a small device she slipped onto the table. Not a phone. Not anything obvious. Patterns bloomed across the screen. 5 names. One pulsed brighter than the rest. "Maintenance sergeant," she said. "He's been clearing gates during family emergencies for months. His convoys overseas were never hit. Not once." The veteran's face tightened. "I remember him, always lucky." "No," Emma said, "protected." The colonel looked at the screen, then at her. "He has a head start." "Yes." "And you still think you can catch him?" Emma finally allowed the smallest flicker of something like grim humor. "Sir, I've chased people with worse odds and fewer bullets. Why would someone with nerve damage volunteer to run toward a gunfight?" They moved fast, too fast for paperwork, too fast for permission. A truck roared through the east gate, gravel spitting behind it. Emma sat in the passenger seat, left hand steady on her weapon, right hand trembling against her thigh. "You okay?" the driver asked, voice tight. "I'll be functional," she replied. "That's all I need." The forest swallowed them. Tire tracks cut fresh lines through dew and dirt. Emma watched the terrain like it was speaking to her. "He'll turn north," she said. "Old Ranger Station, good sightlines, multiple exits." "How do you know?" "Because it's what I do." They reached the station as another vehicle idled outside. The handler. Emma's jaw set. "Stay behind me," she said, "if this goes wrong." "It won't," the driver said, lying bravely. She nodded once. They moved. Inside, voices. 2 men, money on the table, a laptop open mid-transfer. Emma entered first. "Don't move." The handler flipped the table. Chaos erupted. Her first shot went wide, tremor stealing the precision she'd trained around for years. The traitor raised his weapon. Time slowed. Emma knew she wouldn't get the second shot clean. A gunshot cracked behind her. The traitor dropped. Silence followed like an exhale the world had been holding. Emma sank to one knee as adrenaline drained away. Her hands shook harder now. The cost always came after. Backup arrived minutes later. But the work was already done. Why did victory feel so heavy? Back on base, the truth spread quietly. Not gossip, not legend, reality. Emma stood alone again, this time by choice. Apologies came. She didn't take them personally. This wasn't about you, she told them. It was about what you chose to see. When she left, it was without ceremony. No speeches, no medals. Just absence. But the base didn't forget. Because sometimes the strongest lesson doesn't come from someone who demands respect. It comes from someone who never needed it to do what was right. Why did the silence after she left feel louder than any alarm? Fort Benning returned to routine the way institutions always do, by pretending nothing fundamental had shifted. Formations still snapped to attention at dawn. Boots still struck pavement in perfect rhythm. Commands were still barked, still obeyed. On the surface, nothing had changed. But underneath, something had cracked. Emma Mitchell's name wasn't spoken often. Not officially. Her file didn't exist in any system that mattered, and the few references that did appear were buried so deep they might as well have been myths. Yet her presence lingered in the pauses instructors took before shouting, in the way recruits looked twice at the quiet ones, in the uncomfortable awareness that strength wasn't always loud and weakness wasn't always real. Colonel Matthews watched the base from his office window the morning after the arrest, coffee untouched in his hand. The ranger station incident was already classified, locked behind layers of clearance and silence. The maintenance sergeant's death would be ruled a security breach. The handler would never be named. And Emma Mitchell, operative, ghost, survivor, had vanished again. But the damage she uncovered was still spreading. Counterintelligence teams descended quietly, not with sirens or public arrests, but with interviews that went too long, audits that dug too deep, and questions that felt harmless until they weren't. Phones were seized, accounts frozen, movements tracked. The rot was worse than anyone wanted to admit. Emma's data had cracked open a network that extended beyond Fort Benning, 4 bases, a dozen compromised personnel, years of carefully fed misinformation. People who had eaten in the same mess halls, saluted the same flags, signed birthday cards for each other's kids. Betrayal rarely looks like the enemy. That was one of the lessons she'd paid for in nerve damage and sleepless nights. Why did the people who mocked her struggle the most afterward? Lance Morrison couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again. The moment at the ranger station when his finger tightened on the trigger. The moment he realized the shot he fired had ended a life. The moment he understood that if he hadn't taken it, Emma would be dead. He joined the military for structure, for certainty, for a clear line between right and wrong. Emma had shattered that illusion. He reported to duty that morning with bloodshot eyes and a weight in his chest that refused to settle. When he caught his reflection in the locker room mirror, he barely recognized himself. The confidence he'd worn like armor felt thin now, performative. He remembered how easily he'd mocked her, how comfortable cruelty had felt when everyone else laughed along. That shame didn't fade. It sharpened. Madison Brooks felt it too, though hers came dressed as guilt. She built her identity on being untouchable, smart, polished, superior. Watching Emma dismantle that hierarchy without raising her voice left her hollow. The things she'd said, the videos she'd almost posted. She deleted them all. Then she did something no one expected. She apologized. Not publicly, not for attention. She wrote letters instead, long ones, to recruits she'd dismissed, to women who'd left the program quietly, to herself in a way. Derek Chen changed his phone background. Where there had once been highlight reels and follower counts, there was now a single image burned into his screen. A black snake, 7 coils, a skull. Not as a trophy. As a warning. He transferred into base security within the month. And Marcus Webb, the one who had grabbed Emma's arm, volunteered for medic training. No one knew why at first, but he did. He carried the memory of her reflex takedown like a scar, a reminder of how close arrogance comes to getting people killed. He wanted to save lives now, not judge them. Why did Emma keep moving instead of resting? Because rest is a luxury ghosts don't get. She was 3 states away by nightfall, identity already dissolving behind her. New clothes, new name, new rhythm. Her arm was finally in a proper sling, the tremor no longer something she needed to hide. The doctors had been blunt. The nerve damage was permanent, progressive. It would get worse. Emma accepted that with the same calm she'd accepted everything else. Pain was information. Limitation was a problem to solve. She worked from safe houses and borrowed offices, from places that officially didn't exist. Maps covered walls again. Screens glowed with intercepted data. She moved slower now, but she moved smarter. She wasn't hunting individuals anymore. She was dismantling systems. The network she'd exposed was only one thread in something larger: private money, ideological rot, people who believed they were patriots while selling lives for influence. Emma followed the numbers, the overlaps, the quiet anomalies others dismissed as noise. Sometimes she worked alone. Sometimes she didn't. Unit 730, one was gone in name only. Ghosts, after all, had a habit of multiplying. Why did the tremor never stop her aim? Because she stopped fighting it. Emma learned to shoot between tremors, to breathe through them, to let the shaking become part of the rhythm instead of an enemy to defeat. New stabilizers helped, advanced braces, medications that steadied her hand for short windows. But mostly it was experience. Muscle memory deeper than nerves. You don't forget how to protect people just because your body changes. The younger operators watched her with something like reverence, not because she was flawless, but because she was. Because she adapted instead of quitting. Because she never pretended the cost hadn't been real. When they asked how she did it, she gave the same answer every time. "You don't need to be unbreakable," she said. "You just need to decide what matters more than breaking." Why did Fort Benning never quite feel the same? Training protocols changed quietly. Not officially credited to anyone. No memos citing Emma Mitchell, but the shift was unmistakable. Instructors were required to justify dismissals. Mockery was no longer tolerated as motivation. Silence stopped being equated with incompetence. The culture didn't soften. It matured. New recruits arrived every cycle, too old, too small, too different. Some washed out, some didn't, but fewer were broken just to prove a point. Colonel Matthews kept a file that didn't exist. Inside were fragments, sightings, patterns, operations that succeeded where failure had been predicted, ambushes that never happened, patrols that walked away because someone somewhere had noticed something wrong in time. The reports were unsigned. But he knew. Sometimes, late at night, he wondered how many lives had been saved by someone who would never attend a ceremony, never receive a folded flag or a standing ovation. Ghosts don't need those things. Why did her legacy matter more than her name? Years later, a quiet recruit would arrive at another base with a limp that looked inconvenient and a record that looked unimpressive. The instructors would hesitate before dismissing them. Someone would remember a story. Someone would choose patience over ridicule. That was Emma's real work. Not the arrests, not the firefights, but the shift in how people looked at each other before deciding who mattered. Somewhere in the dark, Emma Mitchell continued moving. Her hands shook more now. Her hair showed threads of gray, but her resolve remained unbroken. She closed one file and opened another. Because the world hadn't grown kinder. And someone still needed to stand between the darkness and the people who never saw it coming. Why did the world keep turning as if nothing had happened, while she carried the weight of everything that had? Time didn't slow down for Emma Mitchell. It never had. It only layered itself, memory over memory, mission over mission, until the past felt less like something behind her and more like something breathing just over her shoulder. Weeks after Fort Benning faded into classified silence, she found herself staring at another wall of maps in another room that officially did not exist. Different country, different accent outside the window, same work. Her right hand trembled as she marked a location with a grease pencil. The shake was worse in the early hours, when exhaustion stripped away her discipline and left her alone with the damage she carried. She steadied it with her left hand, waiting for the spasm to pass before continuing. This was the part no one romanticized. The quiet aftermath. The body's bill coming due. She remembered the faces at Fort Benning, not with anger but with clarity. How easily they dismissed her. How naturally cruelty had flowed when weakness gave them permission. It hadn't surprised her. It had confirmed what she already knew. Most people don't fear evil. They fear being wrong. And when confronted with that possibility, they double down. Emma pushed the thought aside and returned to the screen. Financial transfers, travel patterns, encrypted chatter hiding behind legitimate logistics firms. The trader network hadn't ended with one handler in a ranger station. It never did. That was the lie people told themselves to sleep at night, that there was a single villain, a clean ending. Reality was messier. Networks adapted. So did she. Why did she refuse to stop, even when her body begged her to? Because stopping meant listening. And listening meant remembering. She remembered the first night after Syria, when the tremor began. How she'd stared at her hand like it belonged to someone else. How the medics had avoided her eyes. How the pain from the nerve damage had been nothing compared to the realization that her body, once her most reliable weapon, had been permanently altered. They told her she could still serve. They just didn't know how. So she figured it out herself. Emma learned new ways to shoot, new ways to move, new ways to plan so she wouldn't need to be the one pulling the trigger unless absolutely necessary. She became quieter, more patient, deadlier in subtler ways. She learned that intelligence saved more lives than bullets ever could. That patience outlasted rage. That survival wasn't about being whole, it was about being useful. The younger operators she occasionally trained didn't see a legend when they looked at her. They saw a woman who worked longer hours than anyone else, who never raised her voice, who corrected mistakes without humiliation, who never mocked weakness because she knew how temporary strength could be. They didn't ask about the tremor. Not at first. Why did she finally allow herself to be seen by the next generation? It happened during a late briefing when fatigue made her slower than usual. Her hand shook hard enough that a stylus slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the table. The room went still, not with judgment, but concern. One of the younger operators reached for it without thinking and placed it gently back near her left hand. "Does it hurt?" he asked. Emma considered the question longer than necessary. "Yes," she said finally, "sometimes." He hesitated, then why keep doing this? She met his eyes, really met them. "Because pain is just information," she said. "It tells you where the problem is. What you do with that information is what matters." She didn't say the rest. That some pain never goes away. That some nights were longer than others. That every tremor carried the echo of a room in Syria where wires had been clipped to her skin and questions had been asked she could never answer. She didn't need to say it. They understood anyway. Why did the culture she left behind matter more than the missions she completed? Back at Fort Benning, the changes continued quietly. No banners, no speeches, just different choices made by people who'd learned something they couldn't unlearn. A drill instructor paused before tearing into a recruit who struggled with grip strength. He adjusted the training instead, watched the kid adapt, saw potential where he might once have seen failure. A young woman with a stutter stopped trying to disappear during briefings. Someone waited for her to finish speaking instead of cutting her off. Her ideas turned out to be sharp, necessary. A soldier with a limp was given time instead of ridicule. He developed a balance technique that made him nearly impossible to knock down in close quarters. None of them knew Emma Mitchell, but they lived in the space she'd carved open. Colonel Matthews followed the ripple effects through reports and retention numbers and performance metrics. The base hadn't grown softer. It had grown smarter. He kept that thought to himself most days. But sometimes, late at night, he allowed himself to imagine what the military might look like if more people understood the lesson Emma had paid for in blood and nerve damage. That strength wasn't uniform, and neither was courage. Why did ghosts leave marks even when they were gone? Emma received a package 6 months after Bennying. No return address, no markings inside a photograph. 5 figures in black gear stood before a helicopter in the desert, faces obscured, one of them smaller than the rest, posture unmistakably familiar. On the back, a single line. Ghosts don't die, they multiply. She closed her eyes for a long moment. Not grief. Recognition. She burned the photo after memorizing every detail. Habit, protocol, survival. But the message stayed. She wasn't alone. She never had been. Why did she finally allow herself one moment of rest? It came unexpectedly. A quiet evening. No alarms. No urgent pings. Just the hum of distant traffic and the soft glow of a city that didn't know what almost happened every day in its name. Emma sat on the edge of a borrowed bed, her sling discarded nearby. Her hand trembled as she reached for a glass of water. She used both hands, steadying herself without shame. For the first time in a long while, she let herself feel tired. Not broken. Not finished. Just human. She thought of the recruits who would never know her name, the instructors who would hesitate before cruelty, the operators who would walk into missions that should have been traps and wouldn't be. That was enough. It had to be. Because ghosts didn't get endings. They got continuations. And tomorrow there would be another file to open, another pattern to follow, another life that might be saved because someone somewhere was paying attention. Emma lay back and closed her eyes. The tremor continued. So did the mission. Why did the hardest moment come when there was nothing left to fight? Emma Mitchell learned this truth slowly, the way all lasting truths arrive, not in gunfire or urgency, but in stillness. The night was quiet, too quiet. No screens blinking red, no radios whispering warnings, just the distant sound of rain brushing against a window she hadn't bothered to look through. Her right hand rested on her chest, trembling softly. She didn't stop it. She let it be. For years, movement had been her answer to everything. If she kept going, the memories couldn't catch her. If she stayed useful, the pain had meaning. But now, in the absence of immediate threat, the weight of everything she had outrun finally settled. She saw their faces again. Not the enemies. Her team. The ones who had trusted her without hesitation. The ones who had followed her into places the world would never acknowledge. The ones whose names existed only in encrypted files and private grief. She had survived when they hadn't. That truth never softened. Why did survival feel heavier than sacrifice? Because survival demanded memory. Emma rose slowly and crossed the room, every step deliberate. Her reflection in the darkened glass startled her, not because she looked broken, but because she didn't. Gray threaded through her hair now. Lines etched her face in ways youth never prepared her for, but her eyes were steady. Clear. Still here. She traced the black snake on her arm with 2 fingers. The coils had faded slightly over the years, the edges softened by time. The mark no longer frightened people who saw it. It reminded them of something they couldn't quite name. She remembered the moment she'd earned it, the ceremony that wasn't a ceremony, the nod instead of applause, the understanding glance from someone who would never call her a hero. "You don't get this for being fearless," he'd said. "You get it for going anyway." She hadn't known then how many times she would need that reminder. Why did the final mission feel different from all the others? The file arrived without urgency. No red flags, no immediate deadlines. Just a pattern that didn't belong. Emma recognized it instantly, not because it was large, but because it was subtle, too clean, too symmetrical, the kind of thing built by people who believed themselves untouchable. She studied it for days, moving slowly now, carefully. The tremor worsened with stress, and she had learned not to rush what mattered. She traced connections with her left hand, letting her right rest when it needed to. By the time she finished, she understood. This wasn't another operation. It was the end of one. The network she'd been dismantling for years had finally grown tired of hiding. They were consolidating, closing accounts, burning intermediaries. Running. Emma sent the packet upward through channels that rarely saw daylight. She didn't attach her name. She didn't need to. She watched from a distance as raids unfolded across continents, quiet arrests, assets frozen, people who had believed they were invisible discovering they were not. It took months. She didn't involve herself directly. Her work was already done. Why did walking away feel like the bravest thing she'd ever done? Because no one ordered it. The message came late one evening, a single line from a number she would never save. "You've carried this long enough." Emma stared at the screen for a long time. She expected relief. What she felt instead was grief. Letting go meant accepting that the mission no longer needed her, that the system she'd helped reshape could function without her constant vigilance, that others, strong, capable, quieter than she'd been at their age, were ready. She powered down her devices one by one. Maps came off the walls. Files were sealed and transferred. The room emptied. For the first time since Syria, she didn't immediately plan what came next. Why did the world look different when she finally stepped back into it? Emma moved somewhere small, anonymous, a place where no one asked questions and routine had its own comfort. She worked with her hands now, slow, careful tasks that required patience more than precision. The tremor was still there. Some days it was worse. Some days it barely whispered. She learned to live around it instead of against it. Occasionally she'd catch a news segment about a thwarted attack, a dismantled cell, a quiet success attributed to joint efforts and ongoing vigilance. She smiled at those, not because she needed credit, but because they meant someone had been paying attention. Why did her story continue even after she stopped telling it? One afternoon, a young woman approached her at the market. "You were in the military," she said, "not a question." Emma nodded. "They said I'm not a good fit," the woman continued. "Too quiet, too slow. I was thinking of quitting." Emma studied her face, the doubt, the frustration, the familiar ache of being underestimated. She chose her words carefully. "Being quiet isn't a flaw," she said. "It's a skill. Don't let anyone rush you into disappearing." The woman swallowed. "Did you ever doubt yourself?" Emma paused. "Yes," she said. "Every day. I just didn't let that be the loudest voice." The woman thanked her and walked away straighter than she'd arrived. Emma watched her go. A ripple. Why did the mark on her arm still matter? Because it wasn't about what she'd done. It was about what she'd endured. The black snake wasn't a symbol of violence. It was a reminder of restraint, of choosing when not to strike, of knowing the cost and accepting it anyway. Emma sat on her porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky painted in quiet colors that didn't ask for anything. Her hand trembled as she lifted a cup of tea. She didn't hide it. Somewhere, someone was being trained a little differently, judged a little less quickly, protected a little more thoughtfully. That was the legacy. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And long after the noise fades, that action continues, steady, unseen, and enough.